Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. It has been our endeavor at BYJU'S to help and support IAS aspirants at every stage of their preparation. Now, when IAS Mains Examination 2021 is over and aspirants are gearing up for the last leg of this prestigious examination, that is personality test, we are back again to assist them forming an insight and opinion about multiple topics and issues concerning our great nation and its body polity. Like last year, we have meticulously curated a special series of talk and lectures to help our young would-be steel pillars of this nation in their personality test. In this special series of talk, we invite the stalwarts of our nation, renowned personalities, intellectuals, academicians, eminent civil servants to address the young aspirants of UPSC Civil Services examination and guide them by sharing their views on significant topics. These topics have been chosen carefully from various spheres of knowledge, such as Indian economy, our judicial system, India's foreign policy, ecology and environment, etc. When we started this series last year, we received overwhelming response from students in general and from those preparing for their personality test in particular. Again, not to say this series will help you to get ready, sharpen your verbal and non-verbal intellectual skills, and give finishing touches to your final stage of preparation and provide you with pragmatic insight to maximize your score in your personality test. In our special series of talk, today we are joined by legendary economist Professor Ila Patnaik ma'am. Ma'am is professor at National Institute of Public Finance and Policy. She had been principal economic advisor to the Government of India. She has also worked at National Council of Applied Economic Research and Indian Council for Research in International Economic Relations. She was also economics editor at the Indian Express. She is a prolific writer as well, and she was the only female economist ranked within the top 10 in India. Welcome to BYJU'S, ma'am. We are really honored and privileged to have you in this talk. Ma'am, we are passing through COVID pandemic, and Indian economy along with world economy has been the biggest casualty. What steps would you suggest as policymaker to mitigate these challenges or the headwinds facing our economy?
I think the first biggest step that the Indian government as well as all other governments are doing and need to continue to do is to vaccinate people, because you basically have to get people out so that they are able to participate in economic activity, get back to work, get back to going out, going to hotels, traveling, and doing all those things that will actually bring the economy back on track. So, vaccination has been and needs to continue to be one of the top things that a government has to do. I think beyond vaccination then comes the question of how to help the economy, those sectors which have been really hit hard, how to help those sectors, how to help those people who have been hit hard, and you then have to have sector specific and poor targeted policies.
Right. So that is the very interesting thing, ma'am. You said first vaccinate people so that people start coming out, and then only economic activities would resume. Thank you, ma'am. And what about rural economy? The migrant workers, MSME sector has been hit very, very hard. So what specific measures would you suggest that a government should take or initiate, or from a layman's perspective, what should be the first 3, 4, 5 steps?
So, see, the rural economy has not been hit that badly. Okay. While migrant workers have gone back, it is because the urban economy has been hit badly, not the rural economy.
Right.
Actually, agriculture hasn't done so badly because, people in agriculture could go out and could do their normal activities. What you need to do is to give them some support. So those who have been hit, they have gone back, and there has been a big increase in Manrega because of that. Now this year in the budget, there was a cut in the demand, cut in the total allocation for Manrega by about 25%. Right. So from 95 something to about 73 to 78,000 crores. But that's because now the pandemic is hopefully over and people will be able to get back to work. So some support is being given, but on the whole it is not the rural sector that needs that much of additional support. Right. So the support that is required then, whether it is for MSMEs which are hurt, is again, for example, credit guarantees have been given so that MSMEs are able to take loans and continue to employ people, so that people don't go back to their villages and put additional pressure there on their families. So you have MSMEs, small industries are actually the biggest employer in any economy, including the US, not just India. Okay? It is small industries, so 85% of employment even in the US is in small firms, not in the big firms. In India, it's the same thing. So the big industries only employ a few, very small percentage of the people. Right. So you need to give them support, and that is mainly what has been done through credit guarantees.
So it was not the rural economy that was hit hard, and it was migration, because urban economy was because of lockdown, other things.
Because of lockdown, because of COVID, because people didn't get job opportunities, so they went back, and that was the pressure on the rural economy.
Okay. Great. Thank you, ma'am. Now, ma'am, during pandemic, we witnessed that inequality is rising, and the World Economic Forum report also says that it is all around it is happening, which is actually threatening some civil society also. So many countries, because inequality is the biggest reason behind any revolt or any unrest, civic unrest. What would you suggest to make Indian growth story more inclusive?
See, what you are describing is what economists often describe as K-shaped recovery.
K-shaped.
Which means that some are going down, contracting, while others are going up. So when you see the very poor who've lost jobs during COVID, their incomes are actually contracting, not even staying where they were. Right? It's not a stagnation. Right. They are contracting. And those who are able to, online services, so many things, health sector, yes. Those who've done well have actually grown and gone up very fast. So that's what you're basically describing as the K-shaped recovery. Yes, now, you see, there is no single playbook, textbook ready for what to do in a pandemic. There can be two options in front of the government. One option is that you directly address the very poor who have been hit. So you beam money into Manrega, old people, handicapped, women have been given money. So money is sent directly, and this is done everywhere in the world. So money is given directly. In the case of India, money is given directly to individuals because we have the Aadhaar linked bank accounts, Jandan Aadhaar mobile. So we can do it directly to individuals. In advanced economies, that is being done through small firms. So companies. So companies have been given money to continue to employ people. So in Europe, in America, you basically do it on the basis of payroll. So you say that, the government is giving companies money so that companies don't throw people out of jobs. So, and employment continues. So that is the way they can do it. We can't do it like that because we don't have those databases. We don't have, companies are small, the informal sector is very big. When they register and unregister, you don't know. Most of the time you'll not be able to, if they're not registered, you can't even reach out to them.
Correct.
Right? So in India, that has been the difference. But this is in terms of redistribution and the kind of efforts that have been made to overcome the problem of this K-shaped recovery.
Okay.
You know, and they've tried to tax people at the upper end and give money to the lower end. Also, a lot of borrowing has been done, so that intertemporally. Intertemporally means this is a bad time, right? So you borrow from future. Good times are going to come when the pandemic is over, so you borrow from the future, you spend today. So a lot of that is being done. And overall, of course, some policies which are to continue to give you, you know, higher growth, investment and so on. That
is great, ma'am. Great, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Now, ma'am, this budget for 2022-23, newspapers say, because we are layman, we are students, it is growth centric. So, but we have seen this controversy between growth and development. So, this growth centric, is it development centric also? And what is the dichotomy between the two, ma'am? Because as a student, it creates confusion in my mind.
So very often when you refer to growth, you are referring purely to the increase in gross domestic product, okay, in GDP,
Yes.
which is the entire, whatever value is added by the economy as a whole. And typically when you refer to development, you are referring also to the standards of living, to different areas, sectors, to whether there is equality there. It's not that one sector is going ahead and the other is lagging behind. So development is a broader understanding of when it's growth for incomes of various sectors, various communities, various regions. And that's why some people, when they say that we have a big increase in inequality, they would say, oh, we are seeing growth, but we are not seeing development. So that's how the term development also includes people's standard of living.
Okay.
So whether they are getting adequate health, education,
cleanliness,
cleanliness, gas, water, electricity. So it includes all of those things, not just pure growth. So that's what is being referred to here.
Okay. So, ma'am, is this budget pure growth centric, or will it address developmental concerns also?
See, all budgets, because India is a democracy, all budgets have an element of development. Every time government gives Indira Awas Yojana.
Yes.
So money for housing. Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. So money is given for rural roads. So you don't just have highways. I mean, in fact, if you go back, not just this budget, if you go back many 10, 20 years, you'll see that all through that governments try to give you growth. You can't redistribute poverty. So you need to have growth and then you need to redistribute it. So there is an element of both, including in the present budget. This present budget has been called pro-growth because it has focused more on pushing up growth rate through public sector investment, which wasn't there that much in the previous few budgets, particularly in the last 2 years, because you had to focus a lot more on redistribution because there were people who were so badly hit. Whereas now, hopefully, because the pandemic, it seems like that this will be over, it will recede. So this one is a focus, more a tilt. So it's always like a balance that is constantly being tried.
That means growth and development, as you said, is actually two sides of the same coin. And growth, unless there is growth, how will you redistribute income?
Absolutely.
Great, ma'am. So, because lots of confusion is created, I was getting lots of questions from students. Like, if there is any such question in actual interview, how to make it development oriented, now they can explain it. Like, without growth, no development is possible.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, ma'am, coming to your area of concern, and because we are not aware of the nuances of international trade, what do you think? Are free trade agreements good for India, or can it be one line answer to it? No.
You see, there are no one line answers in economics at all ever, because economics is about trade-offs. Okay?
Yes.
That this means this, whereas if you do this, you get, Now, free trade agreements in the case of India are generally very useful for our trading partner. Because a free trade agreement means that between you and me, we will lower duties, both of us, and we'll allow better terms for each other's products to be imported. If you already have 5% duty, you see, like the Gulf countries with whom free trade agreements are being decided, their import duties are very less. A lot of people go for duty-free shopping to Dubai and to, and they get their low duties there. So, if you are talking, you're doing a free trade agreement with a country that has low duties already and you have high duties, then what would really happen is in economics we call trade diversion, which means that instead of our imports coming from these 10 countries, which let's say they were coming from 10 countries, now because for that one country we are going to lower duties, the imports will come from that one country. Right. So they are very beneficial for our partners. Okay, because we have high duties. If we enter into free trade agreements with countries that have high duties, then they are very beneficial for us. But all this is in the short run, because immediately it is, this is the redistribution of trade and direction of trade that will change because of a free trade agreement. But in the long run, suppose we do free trade agreements with the whole world. Right. Okay, just imagine that case. Then what you're doing is you're lowering duties against everybody, which means that your domestic industry has to become more competitive. Right. And at the end of the day, you want that. You have already, in my example of a free trade agreement with the whole world, which means if they had any barriers against you, you've already gotten those down, which is pushing your exports into them. And if you get your total import duties more or less, let's say against all those 10 partners, you got lower import duties, then you have to be more productive. So that you can compete with those imports. Your domestic industry has to compete. So that's kind of what's, the short-term versus the long-term implications. Okay. In a sort of, maybe I should, because we've talked short-term and long-term, maybe let's also just touch on the medium-term. Right. Industry often wants lower duties if the product is an input. Whereas if the product is the final product, then you want high duties, you want protection. Whereas if you're buying something which is going to go as an input, you're buying a chip which is going to go into the mobile phone, you want a lower duty on it so that you are, getting it cheaper, you're able to produce cheaper. Now, in that sense, suppose there were 10 countries and there was a product on which all 10 could only supply you at the higher duty. Then how a free trade benefits the input importers is because at least from one country you will be able to get inputs cheaper. Right. So that's how that industry will get benefits. Right. So that's why I said no, there's no one
line. And that very answer. Brilliant line you said, ma'am, it's not trade, it's trade-off. That's a beautiful thing. And students or layman usually think it is good or it is bad or something like that. It's not like this.
It's not like
there
this.
There are so many complexities are there.
Absolutely.
So what precaution India should maintain while entering free trade agreements with other countries, or is India's position, you think, is tenable or it's good, or is driven by driven by the spirit of globalization, or driven by its own self-interest?
Many times what you have to look out for is that you don't kill an industry in its nascent stage. So if you are entering into a free trade agreement with a country which will flood your markets with some products which will kill your domestic industry, you may not want to do that. So you may want to take those precautions. Right. So I think what the government is expected to do, should do, is to engage with industry, with stakeholders, so that overall industry is at an advantage, but with a word of caution. That is that this should not be seen as something, on protecting industry should not be seen as something which you're going to give protection forever.
Right.
Once you give protection forever, then India enters into what we had in the 60s, you know,
Right, correct.
60s and 70s, which was we got a closed economy and you know no competition and huge inefficiency and so on. So you just want to give maybe some protection initially, and that is in that phase when you're trying to do that, you talk to your stakeholders. Otherwise, what will end up happening is massive confusion.
Confusion, right.
Because you are trying to protect some, you're trying to not protect others. So if you are going to follow this path of having high tariffs and then having free trade agreements, then you need to do this with a lot of caution.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, there is one question on disinvestment. You had been principal economic advisor to the government of India. Last year we could not meet our target. 1,87,000 crore some target was there. As a policymaker, what hurdles do you find that government couldn't meet its disinvestment target? Or what is your take on the process of disinvestment? Should we sell? Because usually, again, in a layman's perspective, people think we are selling our something. Or what is your stance, or what hurdles did you face? Because no one could watch it more closely than you. You were the principal economic advisor. So what are the issues related to disinvestment?
Okay, so the first issue is, do you want to sell profit-making entities or loss-making entities? Okay, and that is where the biggest trouble arises. What would government want to do? Department of Revenue, Exchequer, what would they want to do? Sell loss-making enterprises.
Right.
What do people want to buy?
Correct.
Profit-making enterprises. Right? So your fundamental issue arises because of what should be bought or sold in terms of profit-making, loss-making. Second, do you want to sell off everything that is not strategic? Okay, so there are industries which the government has been in because of historical reasons, because in the 60s and 70s they used to be good then, and then for the last so many years, you know, they've become inefficient. Because in most of those sectors which are non-strategic sectors, you've actually during these years allowed private sector entry. Right? And private sector, the same product being produced by the private sector versus by the public sector, I think, you know, we have so many examples, whether it is hotel services, whether it's aviation, telecom, so many examples. There is a huge difference in efficiency. Right? Now, why is that efficiency there? What is a firm? I'm sorry if I do some little bit of technical explaining. Right? Right? That basically a firm is an entity in which you organize labor and capital in a particular way to produce an output.
Right.
Okay? When I say the one firm is less efficient and the other is more efficient, then that means that the way you are organizing things in the less efficient firm are not going to give you very good output. Correct? But if I was to tell you that yes, you buy the firm, fine, I am happy to sell it to you, but you can't throw people out because there are these trade unions who will otherwise oppose it. Okay? Would you buy the firm?
No.
Why? Because you can't make it efficient unless you have the freedom to reorganize labor and capital.
Yes.
So the second problem, so the first was, as I said, loss making, profit making. The second problem is that you've got labor in those, you've got unions in those. You have to negotiate your way out of how to dismantle that entity. And then what are you selling?
Absolutely right.
You're actually not selling anything.
Right.
Because your capital has already depreciated, you've got some old stuff. So examples, I think I'm not, so I'm not updated on this because these are all internal government things. But like some IDPL, Pharmaceutical and Drugs Limited, or HMT, or, so how many of those have any capital that is worth anything? How many of those have labor which is which is effective and will be productive? So then what are you selling? You're not really selling anything.
Correct.
So why would somebody buy? So those are the fundamental problems. Then the third set of issues, if I may continue. Should I continue?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Is to do with the bureaucracy. Because the bureaucracy is always scared of being accused of selling something at a throwaway price. So when things are being sold in the stock market, then they are afraid that, oh, the market is not doing too well. And it's always, oh, the market will do better and I'll be able to sell it at a higher price. Otherwise, there'll be some CAG inquiry or some other inquiry, vigilance, this, that, and the other, and I'll be accused of being underselling or maybe taking a bribe. See, I can't do it on the stock market because the stock market doesn't think the stock is worth anything. Then I find a strategic partner, and if I find a strategic partner, then that is another reason why somebody could accuse me of a bribe. So this fear in the bureaucracy means that you somehow don't want to take a decision. You want to push the can down the road. You want to keep doing, acha, hum assessment kara lete hain, we'll do this, we'll do that, and the other, and then you don't actually want to
sell or
not in your watch.
Right.
So those were the kind of issues that I have seen are some of the three. These are the three big issues.
Big issues. So the point is, ma'am, when we are not achieving that target or disinvestment, the point is that is a beautiful first point, like which property to be sold and which property to be bought. That is pure market dynamics. So what should be the stand of an upcoming bureaucrat? Like they should be more decisive, they should be ready to take some challenge or something like that, or what would be your suggestion to them?
I think rather than that the bureaucrat has to be absolutely clear that he has political support. And that if something is to be done, then it is signed off by the minister, by the highest levels, and that's why I think this round has been a little more successful than earlier rounds, because it was Niti Aayog which gave a list, and then it was signed off by cabinet, and so the responsibility did not seem to fall on the bureaucrat.
Correct.
So the bureaucrat, of course, has to be supremely cautious because the way the system is, but has to be clear that there is political support, and once there is political support, and it's clear that yes, we need to sell these enterprises not just because the enterprise is loss making and is going to get any revenue, but the most important reason for disinvestment is that you can allocate labor and capital better. So it leads to a reallocation of resources in the economy and therefore to higher productivity. So you stop thinking about the budgetary impact and you think about the economic impact.
Right. So optimum utilization of the resources.
Absolutely.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much. Ma'am, during 70s, 80s and 90s, we found a huge wave of globalization. Thereafter, we found backlash against it, Brexit or anti-globalization or deglobalization kind of thing. So what should be India's stance? Should it continue with economic integration with the rest of the world, or should we also go for inward-looking policy? Because the kind of disenchantment that we face around the world, like rising inequality or disenchantment from globalization, what should be India's stance on globalization?
I don't think India has an option. We are going to be part of the world. We are very much going to integrate with the world, whether it is the flow of capital, of labor inside or out, whether it's Indian companies buying companies abroad, whether it is foreign companies investing here, whether it's technology adoption, goods, new methods of production, all of it. We are not going to be isolated, and I don't think that India's attempts to be isolated were successful in the 60s, 70s.
Right.
So, those who talk anti-globalization are usually maybe those who have gone to the other extreme, where they lost out the balance, So that's why I think my sense is that the answer to your question has been given by the government as Atmanirbhar Bharat.
Atmanirbhar Bharat.
That we want to be self-reliant and yet we want to be part of the world. So you don't have a choice. You have to be part of the world, but you have to do it in a manner that you are self-reliant, you develop your own capabilities, you develop competitive industry, better allocation of resources here, so that you can be part of the world but on an equal footing.
Great. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much. Ma'am, in the same context, how do you explain Make in India? Is it inward looking policy, or some people call it should be Make for India? We are layman, we do not know the nuances of this. So Make in India is inward looking policy, or something more than that?
So I think Make in India is an aspiration, not exactly a policy, right? So it's an aspiration that we want to create conditions so that instead of importing things that we can make ourselves and make them well ourselves, we make them here. The approach to doing that maybe in a few cases has been temporarily giving some protection to industries, in agarbatti or in some of the other handmade products where we can be killed by mass manufactured imports. But more than that, it is to become competitive. It is to improve ease of doing business, is to have lower corporate tax rates, is to try to attract investment by opening up to FDI. So you want to attract good business to make here.
Okay, that's a beautiful line, ma'am. It's an aspiration, not a policy initiative. That a student must remember. Great, ma'am. Ma'am, in 2023, India will have its own digital currency, as announced by the Honorable Finance Minister. Again, there are so many points here and there. Will it affect monetary policy transmission, or how do you see this from the paper currency to digital currency?
Actually, India already, compared to other countries, has a lot of digital currency. We have been using digital payment systems.
Right.
In fact, my son, who's about 23 years old, doesn't carry cash most of the time. He just walks around with his mobile phone, which is that he is using digital payment systems and he's using digital currency. Now, when for countries which don't do that and don't have a lot of wallets and payment systems where cash is more dominant, for them it is more important than for us, because we are already using digital currency a lot. Now, the details of that digital currency, whether it will become equally easy to transact from domestic to foreign, whether it will be back to back, the rupee rate will be back to back, and third, whether we'll be able to actually withdraw cash. There will be points where you can turn your digital into cash if required, because you can't go completely digital.
Right.
Cash always has a good, it's always good to carry some cash. I always tell him, you'll go to a place where your internet will not work,
Yes.
and then you'll cry.
Yes.
Right? So you always want to carry some cash with you for. So will you be able to withdraw from digital to cash? Will that conversion be possible? At what rate will that conversion be possible? What will be the rules governing carrying it abroad? All these will be very interesting questions, and as the policy unfolds, we will see.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, coming back to your area of interest, inflation and growth. Government is pumping money to mitigate the ill effects of this COVID pandemic on, particularly on unorganized sector. It is leading to some spiraling inflation also. But now we are seeing a new trend like American Federal Reserve. They have started increasing interest rate. So will it not impact growth? How this balance will be achieved by RBI? On the one hand, because of high liquidity during pandemic, we found inflation. Now when government is, or RBI, trying to squeeze liquidity out of the system, will it impact growth? So I'm not able to understand this contradiction, inflation versus growth.
Okay, so let's just step back for 2 years. So for 2 years, all over the world, you had a policy of both an expansionary fiscal
Yes.
that government was spending a lot of money, and expansionary monetary. So what monetary policy would do is it would provide a lot of liquidity so that the government could also borrow at lower interest rates, people could also borrow at lower interest rates, and there could be a lot of credit growth because you wanted people to be able to borrow. Even though the actual credit growth wasn't so high because the demand was low.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But there was an attempt that there should be credit growth. Now, in that period, a lot of focus was on increasing demand.
Yes.
It was a focus on increasing demand at a time when there were supply issues. If you refer back to the, I would recommend, refer back to the economic survey and some of the things written by the chief economic and principal economic advisors last year. And what they were saying, so this is basically what influenced policy in India as well, is that if we try to have too much of an expansion of demand at a time when supply is the issue, then we will get inflation. So our policies were relatively less expansionary on the fiscal front. Right? Because if you did too much expansion, you are just going to get inflation because the problem was a supply side problem. Why was it a supply side problem? Because you had imposed lockdowns.
Yes.
You had COVID, you had imported inflation, you had shipping logistics issues. So just by increasing demand at a time when you could not get higher supply made no sense. Right? That is what, but a lot of economies, a lot of countries, that depends on their politics. They did both expansionary, fiscal and monetary. So you are today in a situation where inflation is higher. It's higher in the world, it is higher in India. And now fiscal policy can move away. In our case, it's not that much of a difference. In other cases, it will be a big difference where, they can stop wherever, the COVID pandemic fears are over and that the economy settles down, so they can go back to doing a bit of reduction in fiscal expansion. While at the same time, now monetary policy will have to fight inflation, which is why you're seeing Bank of England 2 raises in a row. You're seeing the Fed. You're basically seeing advanced economies have already set off on that path of normalization. Emerging economies are also in many places started doing. We'll also be the Monetary Policy Committee. Already, even if the committee does not take decisions on raising the repo rate, which is the instrument that it has in its hands, but the already the job of contraction of liquidity and withdrawal of high liquidity from the system has been going on for last couple of months that the RBI has started doing. And there was less liquidity already compared to earlier. So that had already started. Going forward, what should RBI do? What should the Monetary Authority do? Now, its first job will have to be to combat inflation. Okay, it cannot continue to support growth through higher liquidity because it is going to lead to higher. It will give them higher inflation. Government bond yields will go up a bit. So repo rate will go up a bit. But if you think about what had contributed to the reduction in growth or investment and consumption, it was not so much interest rates. It was the demand conditions, it was the pandemic. Once you get out of the pandemic, then even at a 0.25 or a 0.5% higher interest rates, you will still see investment happening, you'll still see borrowing happening. With the government giving a push to capex, you'll see that increases investment, public investment. Hopefully it crowds in private investment, and even though interest rates are slightly higher. So I would say growth is not going to be affected as much because of slightly higher interest rates.
So beautifully explained, ma'am. Thank you. Ma'am, now coming back to the issue of unemployment. Even before COVID-19 pandemic, we were called an economy of having jobless growth. what is this? Is it jobless growth? And this situation was further aggravated during pandemic, unemployment at all-time high. So there are two aspects of my question, two parts. First, what is jobless growth, or was Indian growth story jobless growth? And second part is how to deal with rising unemployment. Should government jobs be increased? How to give a fillip to employment generation?
So let's start with jobless
Yes.
growth. So one aspect of it is that people aspirations are high. One aspect of it is that maybe that at some very low wage rate they could all get jobs as unskilled workers,
Right.
but people don't want that. Okay, so one element of it is when it is an economy in transition, when it is a country in transition, when you have rapidly increased the employment, the education level of your youth, whether it was through right to education, whether it was through all these self-shiksha abhiyans, whether a lot of,
Right.
and yet your education system is somewhat unable to create the kind of people who are required by industry, that there is a mismatch. If you talk to industry, you will find that they say that they are not getting people, they are not getting the right people. You ask from that side, and they are not able to find the right staff for work. If you ask people at the supply side, they are not able to find jobs. So I think that what people call jobless growth is a lot to do with this mismatch.
Okay.
Which is that yes, education is producing something, but and this is pre-pandemic, so we are
Yes.
first on that question.
Right.
So education is producing people, but those people are not exactly what industry needs, or the quality is not good enough, or that is why attempts have been made for a long time now on skill development.
Yes.
That let's try and do some skill development, which is what might work, that those might be the kind of skills. Of course,
Right.
we're at a very nascent stage and we are still trying to bridge that mismatch. There are attempts to start portals. So the
Right.
e-Shram portal, for
Yes.
example,
Yes.
is an attempt to get matching. So if you get all the people who are looking for jobs, have certain professions, so they are informal workers.
Right.
At the moment, it's not that they're looking for a job,
Right.
but tomorrow they could be. So
Right.
it could be a place where you could even get jobs. So you first want to register whoever is skilled in certain thing. So I think that is typically what somebody in another economy would call frictional.
Yes.
But in our case, it has become structural,
Okay.
because it is not like within 2 months you'll be able to overcome that, because the mismatches are too much. So that is part of what was happening in terms of one element.
Yes.
Another element is also that today the world, we are importing so many things, and especially when you think of labor intensive stuff, we are importing that, Chinese products which we are importing, not producing them locally.
Right.
And jobs in manufacturing have not grown as in a typical growth path. So Kuznets, or you look at the typical growth path, and that's not what India had. That first people went from agriculture to manufacturing, and then from manufacturing and rest of industry to services. That's
Right.
not what happened in India.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
We kind of, you could say, missed the manufacturing bus.
Right. Right.
Right. So then people are going straight into services, and jobs are getting created in services. But that's also something that many people are self-employed. Many people don't feel that this is a regular job.
Right.
So I think part of what our structural transformation is such that it is not. We are not in equilibrium, and that's part of the story.
Great. So we are from fictional, we became structural.
Structural.
And that is a beautiful line, ma'am. Like our education system, what they are producing and what industry is requiring. There is a huge mismatch between the two. That is why it is called.
Should I answer the second part
Yes,
of your
ma'am.
question?
Please, ma'am. Please,
Okay.
ma'am.
So in the pandemic, Because of lack of ability to go out, because of lockdowns, because of COVID itself, a lot of small industries, retail businesses, dhabas, restaurants, those that create a lot of jobs, they got hit. Now, I feel that the path out of it is not that the government provides jobs. Okay. I mean, you know that when the
Yes.
government tries to provide one job, because the conditions are such that you'll get your, permanent employment, this, that, there are too many applicants, and also that, the very few, government can only provide very few
Right,
such jobs.
right.
So the way out is actually to make India a competitive economy, to attract business, to improve ease of doing business, and have a flourishing environment in which people invest and hire people.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much. Ma'am, one question is related to farm sector. Our farm sector issue of supply is not there. Supply is increasing, agricultural production is going up, but farmers' income is not going up. And particularly after the repeal of those farm laws, what is the way ahead? What is the way forward for the modernization, improvement of farm sector?
I think at the moment, politics does not allow those laws to be passed. So that means that allowing markets to function, or for India to become a single market, is not going to happen.
Okay.
But what the government can do in the meanwhile is invest in research, in institution building, in warehouses, in warehousing regulation, in trying to get standardized products through warehousing, help support, give support services of various kinds to farmers. In my opinion, you also need to have policies that don't push farmers into cereal production.
Okay.
Okay, because yes, it might help Haryana and Punjab farmers and some Western UP farmers that they keep producing cereals, and you give high MSP and regulated prices of water and electricity power, and give high subsidies for fertilizers. But while it may be good in the short run for the farmer who is doing it, and particularly if he's an old person who is doing that, but at the end of the day, the consumers, if you think of a typical consumer, they are moving more and more towards fruit, vegetable, milk, fish, eggs. They're not just eating more and more wheat and rices.
Right.
They are inferior goods. As we become richer, we don't just eat more wheat and rice. So agriculture has to be encouraged through various other investments, in the absence even of the farm laws, to move towards diversification of, and to move towards products that we now want to consume.
Right. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much. Ma'am, last question. Do you wish to give some suggestion, any advice to the students who will watch your this enlightening and insightful conversation in economics? Like economics is so tough and so tricky, especially IAS aspirants. They call it the toughest subject, and they do not have easy. Only guides are available, ma'am. So would you wish to give some advice to the students how to approach economics, and not only for interview purposes, as a foundation student who wants to start his preparation, what should be, I know this is a very complex answer, but what should they follow to understand economics?
I think a good place to start is the economic surveys.
Economic survey.
Yeah. So if I think that not that they're all very interesting reading, but start with last 5-7 years. Start with the survey that I was part of.
Yes.
Right, from
Yes, ma'am.
2014 onwards.
Yes, ma'am.
So the first survey of the government was in 15. Maybe at least that kind of gives you a full picture of the entire Indian economy.
Right.
So that's a good place to start.
And then your lectures also. to watch out for. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
So this was our conversation with great economist Ila Patnaik, ma'am. Thank you so very much.